And we are live. Welcome, friends, to another Collectors Series episode. And with me, I have Iowa Dave. Iowa Dave, thank you for joining me today and helping us understand your journey through collectibles and collecting cards.
Dennis, it's great to be here. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I think we're kind of doing an impromptu episode here. We're trying to find schedules to match and meet up. And I know it's not always easy to do that. So I appreciate you being open to joining on a whim here, but I think this is going to be a great episode, and we're going to be able to discover a lot about what you find important in the hobby and the kind of cards you like to collect, your journey, the whole thing. I notice you do like to spotlight. I'm going to start with that because I think a lot of folks that hear about you, and that's how I discovered you, is that you spotlight different hobby podcasts and content that you like to listen to, and it's almost like you want to get on your list, right? That's almost from a podcaster. We want to arrive on an Iowa Dave list. So talk to me about that. Where did that come from? And what was the genesis of that whole idea of posting that?
Sure. So I listened for quite a while to podcasts. So I got back into the hobby 2021, around there, late 20. And podcasts really helped me understand what I was doing or what I was not doing.
Yeah.
And I have a really long commute. So my commute to work is about an hour and 10 minutes each way. And I enjoyed listening to books, radio, whatever, music, but the podcast really helped get me through. And there were these hardcore tutoring cram sessions that helped me catch up quick. And every now and then a podcast that I really enjoyed, like a whole series, would just vanish. And I was kind of bummed, but at the same time I thought, what can I do to give back? I don't have any real wisdom in the hobby. I shouldn't start my own, but what I can do maybe is just sort of promote other people's, and not in some obnoxious way. Before I started doing it, I thought, I don't want it to look like I'm just trying to be a hanger on. I'm not just trying to boost my own profile by attaching myself to others. And so on Instagram, I just started promoting through tagging different podcasts that were coming up each day, every day, as a way of hoping others might find it interesting, click on it, listen to it. The listens then go up, and the people who are producing the actual content feel motivated to keep going.
Yeah.
So selfishly, I get to keep listening while I'm driving, but at the same time, I feel like that's my way of quote unquote paying, right? Because the content is free. And this is my way of just saying thank you. So that's why, and I started doing this back in February or March.
Yeah, I noticed it. It was a fairly recent thing, but it's authentic, right? You're very transparent about what you're doing there. Obviously, it's authentic. And I didn't know you had started a podcast until earlier on our conversation right before we pressed record, which is interesting because you're known for promoting other people's work, which I think is great. It's a selfless thing. There's a lot of folks in this world that, will do everything they can to promote themselves, and they go out of their way to promote themselves. And then there's not very many people. There's a few people out there that work to promote others. I'm a firm believer in that. I've never been a guy who tries to promote myself. I don't have very many followers on Instagram, and that's okay. I mean, I know the followers I have are all real people, and try to get rid of the weird accounts that try to follow you. But I think it's important to have that authentic approach and to just try to celebrate other people, right? Like, what do they say? Your light shines brighter when you allow others light to shine as well, right? It makes the room brighter. You don't want to put that light out. So I appreciate that. That's what you're known for. I think that's a really neat, that's an amazing reputation to have. So you started doing that, but now you're doing your own podcast. I want to hear about that. That sounds exciting. So talk to me about that a little bit.
Sure. It's called The Shallow End, because that's sort of where I play in the hobby. I do have a few cards that are in the 3-figure range, but for the most part, a lot of people are up here. I'm down here. And so my knowledge of the hobby, the cards that I have in the hobby are in the shallow end. That's the title. And I've just finished wrapping up the 6th episode.
We lost Dave there. I'm really thinking about getting back into 89 Topps. I think the Greg Jeffries Future Stars card is, man, that card is very underrated and undervalued. I think there's an opportunity with a PSA 10. If we start I think we could start something here. 89 tops. Gary Sheffield, Future Stars, and the Greg Jeffries Future Stars. I mean, I think we're planning on that card eventually paying for a mortgage when we're 9 years old. We knew it was going to happen, right? I know there was the 88 Donruss too, but that wasn't as exciting as the 89 tops. On the 89 tops, a little bit more exciting. The Future Stars. I mean, they had the letters. The letters were like, just as a kid, you're like, this is it. Oh my gosh, you know, centering. We didn't know about centering. I mean, we're just like, hey, we got one. We figured we were the only one that got one until we went to 5th grade and went to lunch or recess, and everybody had one, even the girl that didn't collect cards. So that kind of sucked. Oh, we got Dave back. You know what? It's going to be funny. I'm very curious whether Dustin keeps everything I just said and did in. I was taking sips of coffee and being weird and talking about 89 tops, Greg Jeffries. Oh man, I was talking about a lot of weird things, but I'm sure he will try to leave it in just to make fun of me and just to give me a hard time. But I'm going to have to talk to him before he edits this out, because holy smokes.
Are you talking about the 89 tops Future Stars, Greg Jeffries?
Amen, brother.
I just picked one up at National in a PSA 10.
He might have to leave some of that in, because I have some really fun. I was just alluding to the 89 tops. We got to get back into that. I mean, I was thinking about it earlier today, talking to Dustin on the phone, and I'm drinking coffee, and I was just going, hey, there's coffee thoughts, whatever. I was thinking, you know, we got to get back into the 89 tops, man. The Greg Jeffries, the Future Stars. Oh man, that card, just the way it looked, it was so cool. We thought we were going to make all this money with that card. We collected it, and we didn't care about centering or grade, any of that. We just got one. And we went, hey, I got one. I'm like one of the only ones that have one. And then we went to school, and in 5th grade, everybody had one, including the girl who didn't even collect cards. She had one. So it was kind of a butt down, but we still thought it was cool. And then Gary Sheffield with the smile, with the braces. I mean, all these things remind us for childhood, right? I mean, that's that. And then you tell me you bought a PSA 10 at the National. Like, that's really cool, man. I love it.
Before the season started, before the 89 season started, Jeffries, not Griffey, was the chase. Jeffries was the car that everybody wanted. Everybody.
I know. I mean, I was the only one that was chasing Griffey back then, because I grew up north. I'm in Seattle, Washington. Well, I'm between Seattle and Bellingham. I grew up in the Bellingham area. So the Bellingham Mariners is where he played first. It was a big deal. So I was like 7 years old, and that was his first year with Bellingham. So I was really into Griffey, but I was into Griffey. Greg Jeffries was like what everybody wanted, right? That's what we all thought was the coolest car, is the 88 Donruss and the 89 tops Future Stars card. Those were like, that Mike Greenwell. I mean, those are the guys that broadly were being touted as like the guy to chase, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of those. That's really cool. PSA 10, man. I mean, what's the pop on that?
I don't know. I was so excited to see that card. It was at the trade night, and I'm not a big trade night person. Yeah. But I was going through, and it was just sitting there in this guy's case, and asked how much he wanted for it, and he gave this crazy amount, and I'm like, oh, never mind. And then like his dad or someone turned around and goes, no, and then gave a price that was like 70% less than what like his son was asking. And so I'm like, yep, I will take that home and love that card forever.
Nice. Now I have to figure out what the pop is in the Greg Jeffries 89 Future Stars. That's such a cool card. It's a card along with the Upper Deck 89 Griffey that kind of defined. I mean, and I'm 42. So I'm in that generation, you know, I think, you know, I was 9, 10. I was in the generation where that was like the collectors, you know, those guys I just named off are like the big deal, right? Frank Thomas, you kind of go a little bit further, but like the almost pinnacle of collecting for me was 89 and 90, but mostly 89. 89 was like the year. I remember buying all the packs. It was like the most magical year for collecting. Griffey, you know, Jeffries, Sheffield, those are all the guys you remember, right? But every card was really cool to get. So talk to me more about the shallow end. So, I mean, we're talking about cards that you could probably go back now and buy in high grade for not that much, but they can bring you so much joy. Like, how much excitement did you have acquiring that Jeffries in a 10? That must have been pretty cool.
Oh, it was, right. By the way, the pop is 67. I just checked.
67?
67 10s there, yep. When I was, you know, I'm walking through the hall there for trade night, and there's all this stuff. There's so much football, a lot of basketball, and most of the baseball were the first Bowman Chrome Auto something else, right? But when I saw that Jeffries, and it wasn't even on the main part of his table, it was sort of like still tucked in his box, but I knew exactly what card it was because he's sort of leaning over, he's got his his arms on his hips, and he's smiling into the camera.
Yeah.
It just brings you back. It brings you back to why you collected in the first place. And you mentioned you were 89, 90 was your sweet spot, and mine was about 85 through 87 was really my sweet spot. And you can picture what the cards look like, what the individual players' faces look like on the cards. Might not remember the card numbers anymore, but when somebody say brings up, an 87 Canseco Topps, right? You know that it's weirdly airbrushed, right? That he's sitting on the bench in the dugout. Something's not quite right with it, but that card mattered. And you thought someday, if you worked hard enough, you could save up and get the 86 rated rookie Canseco.
Maybe.
And then maybe retire on that, years and years later. But it's just memories. It's why I collect. And it's so part of why I operate in what I call the shallow end, not to beat a dead horse, is because that's just the economics of the situation and how I collect. But it's also because that's where I choose to some degree. When I first got back into the hobby around 20 or 21, I was just buying anything and everything, still at the lower price, but I didn't know. I was buying basketball and football and some soccer and some baseball and who knows what else, everything that I thought I should be collecting at the time. And over the last 2.5, 3 years, as my collection has sort of chipped away to where it is now, I realized I'm a baseball card collector. That's sort of what I am. And while I do like a little bit of modern, it's really that stuff from the 80s and some vintage to a degree that really piques my interest and makes me want to keep moving forward.
So the 80s, that's your target. That's where you collect. That's what you enjoy. I have to say, this is a really heartwarming conversation, and it's also a reminder for me because I started out wanting just to collect the cards from my youth at 89, 80. I at one time or another, I had a PSA 10 and most of those really good 80s cards, right? And some of them weren't worth a lot, but I had them, and that was like to me the pinnacle. And then I kept growing, and I kept learning more, and then I focused it back on Griffey, sold everything, worked into Griffey, and now that's really all I have. The only modern card I own is a couple Julio Rodriguez's cards, but that's a Mariner guy, right? So, but it's all big Griffey cards where I only have 15 cards now. And I used to have like 150 slabs. And, I thought, and I've always kind of been maintained, like, I'll just narrow down to these really, really great cards but they're so expensive. And I've had to sell a lot of stuff I wanted to keep just to get them. And then it's like, that journey is so interesting. And you're kind of reminding me again, what I really wanted to do when I started. But it's exciting to collect. Maybe just go get PSA 9s of everything in the 80s. And you can build out a really cool set, a collection of really cool, like Hall of Fame baseball player rookies in PSA 9, right? You can probably do that fairly without spending too much money, right? That's exciting. It's a good reminder.
It is. It's the set that you wish you could have built when you were a kid.
Correct. Yeah.
But now we actually can, and we can afford more, but we don't want to afford more. Sometimes we do. But, buying a card that is, in this upper echelon of a price for whatever your range happens to be, doesn't give you the same satisfaction or joy or comfort or nostalgia that something from your childhood does.
Do you feel like I'm going to keep pounding on this subject. I think it's a really great, this is a really good talking point. Because I feel like I've switched like 3 or 4 times. So I went and bought Ja Morant, I bought Zion, I bought Luka, I bought everybody, and then I sold it, and a lot of like back and forth until I finally fine-tuned it. And now I'm basically, in every show I talk, everybody, I don't think it's the worst kept secret. I'm a Griffey guy, right? But, I really enjoy that. But at the same time, I do miss the other side of it. There's no way I can afford to buy any other cars. I can't even buy anything else right now. But I could just sell a lot of what I have and start over and be actually fine because of the cards I do have. So I feel like they're fairly, decent cards. And then start over and kind of do what you're doing. There's a part of me that kind of goes, man, maybe I should do that, because that seems like I can have more fun with it and feel a little better about it, right? Because then you can have more quantity, and enjoy it in a very different way, because, you know, when you're doing this, you're kind of going back and forth trying to sell cards to buy cards, and you're having to let stuff go, and it's really frustrating. But what if you just bought stuff that was way less expensive and you could buy more of it, do something meaningful? Do you feel like you've changed gears like that a lot?
Yes.
As you started until now? Like, talk to me about that evolution. Like, what did you start doing, and then how did you get to this?
Sure. So I started collecting around 83, and I collected pretty hard from 83 through 89. Although I did buy some packs in 90 because I got some Frank Thomas's and some Sammy Sosa's. But then I kind of got out of it, and I very, very, very briefly in the early 2000s, I got older, cars, college, that sort of thing. And then very early 2000, when I discovered eBay, I bought a couple of cards because I thought they were shiny, and they are shiny. They were amazing. It was like an A-Rod foil, the SP foil, that one. But then I just stopped. And around 2010, 2011, 2012, I started looking at eBay again. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I just kept looking over and over again at the 53 Satchel page. I think I'd read a book about Satchel, and I was just curious what the cards were going for. But all of our kids were young at that point. I've got 3 kids, and let's say around 2012, they would be 7, 5, and 2. And so imagine me being like, hey, honey, I know we've got like lots of stuff to buy for the kids, but I'm going to get back into sports cards. So that was just a no. But just like everyone else, so my story is not unique. COVID happens, and I'm at home. And one weekend, we drive back to St. Louis, which is where I'm from. It's where my dad still lives. And all my cards were still in the right side of the closet. And he was just so patient. He didn't even care. But nothing else to do. And I just brought them all back and was going to try to sell them. Ended up selling most of them, or some of the junk wax I just recycled. You know, it wasn't really worth sending it off to ComC for a penny a piece. It didn't not even matter. Yeah. So, but I got really, really into it. I was looking into the cards. I remember the first card then that I bought in about 20 years was an Anthony Edwards base Prism rookie, followed by a Juan Soto Topps Chrome base rookie. And it just started to kind of go from there. Yeah. And the stock of the card was fantastic. And I'm not going to say that vintage or junk wax era is better stock wise, because it's not. Some of these chromes and these prisms are just absolutely beautiful card stock. But like I said before, I was just going in 1,000 different directions. Right. I had John Morant, I had Luka, I had Joe Burrow. You know, it just kind of all of the names that were all big guys. Yeah. And then one time it just sort of hit me. I was opening a couple of packs in the basement. I'm not a big ripper, but I was ripping open a couple packs, and what I realized is that why are these baseball cards, why do they not have their logo on their helmet? I didn't know the unlicensed versus licensed.
Oh, the unlicensed stuff. Yeah.
I had this Bobby Witt rated prospect. Like, great. Wait, I'm sorry about the dings there. Like, what is actually going on here? And I started to learn more about it at that point. Yeah. And the more that I started selling off the cards that I didn't want, I found myself going back to baseball. Luka was pretty fascinating, but as I got more involved with Luka, again, they were just base cards. I realized there was no future. I was probably just in it thinking that there might be some money in it. I had no emotional attachment to him whatsoever. You bet. But it kept coming back to baseball. And I put this in, I mentioned this in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, but my collection is almost like a sculpture more than it is a piece of art, right? With a piece of art, you're adding things to the canvas to create something. Whereas with my collection, like a sculpture, I was taking things away to create something. And the more that I took away, when I took out football, when I took out most of my basketball, when I took out soccer and was just left with baseball, that's when my collecting journey really became a journey, and it was less me fumbling around. And that's when I really became interested in it. That's when I really started listening more to podcasts and reading everything I could get. I tried to be like a sponge and just trying to absorb it. And I would just read Cardboard Connection at night, right? Trying to figure out, 25 years of history that I missed. Like understanding things like parallels and all the stuff that your audience already knows about, but I didn't. And so it wasn't until I was collecting cards that I felt good about that I really decided to jump back into this with some passion.
It's the Cardboard Connection is a great resource, and other collectors too. I found are very helpful because they can teach you about all the different sets. And John, the basketball card guy, is a guy I think I just mentioned him on our little interlude break there. Some of the great people, and I probably missed a lot of great people. I know I did. But Filmington, he's another really great one. I think you get these people. I mean, these people that they've done it for years. They understand the hobby. They've been through it, and they can explain to you kind of, this is what happened. This is what was great about this set. Here's when this originally happened. This is what started this. And they kind of walk you through that. So they become kind of an extension to Cardboard Connection. And between the two, you can piece it all together and go, oh, okay, this is the first year of Topps Chrome baseball. This was the first year. This is the first refractor for this player. This was the first, atomic refractor. This is the first embossed refractor. You kind of go down the list, right? You start learning all these different things. And I find that exciting, just kind of learning, that journey of learning all the different things. It's not exciting when you make purchases before you learn. It's good to do the due diligence before. All of us kind of stumbled into 2021, right? I probably bought a few cards at the peak, but I mean, I don't think I got too hurt on that. But I think the lessons that you learn through the whole journey is important, is really important too. And now I feel like we're pretty savvy, right? We're kind of, okay, we know exactly what we want. We know what we don't want. And some things just doesn't have any interest for us anymore. We're like, yeah, that's great. You guys go do that. That's awesome. Good for you. But I really like this. This is really cool to me. This gets me excited.
Yeah, and what you just said, I completely agree with. People in the hobby can help you. And for me, it was a local LCS that there was a person who worked there that really helped me. We would just sit there and talk for 15, 20 minutes at a time. And he never got out of the hobby. He was a kid, and then his career became sports cards. And being able to listen to someone with that sort of experience, it was like a crash course. It was like going to night school, right? Just trying to learn all about it. And you're 100% right. Just picking the brains of others, it's invaluable.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people that want to help folks out too, which is kind of nice. You get the opportunity to you gain relationships. I remember reaching out to some of these people before I started doing content myself. And then when I started doing content, it was kind of fun to go back and revisit that. Oh, did you end up getting that card, or are you still trying to collect this guy? And okay, yeah, then it kind of just turned into, the last year or so, all I'm talking to really are Griffey guys, and just soaking all of that up. And I just can't get enough of that. And I feel like there's always another stone to unturn and learn about, right? Just so many things, so many cards, and the history just keeps going. And there's different mentalities on how people collect too, right? People have different opinions on what is better, what is not better, what's important, what's not important, all that kind of stuff. So everybody has an opinion, which is okay. And I think there's room for all that. There's room for differing opinions and all these things. That's what makes it interesting, man. If everybody just agreed on every one little thing, then it wouldn't be it wouldn't be as exciting. So, yeah, I think it all kind of lends to itself. So what are your goals right now? Talk to me about, I know you like these 80s cards and all that. Is there any particular card that you like to collect, or a set that really excites you that you'd like? What's your favorite set of all time? You're like, gosh, that's the set I always want to go back to. It's the set I love. Or is there a player?
It's, first of all, the set is 87 Fleer baseball. It's what a set. It's a light blue border. It's very unfleer for anything they had ever done at that time. It was bright. It was vibrant. That's my favorite set. But I don't really want to put sets together. I put a set together when I first got back in. I put together a 93 Topps Finest basketball refractor set.
Nice.
And it was fantastic. And then I finished it, and I thought, okay.
Now what?
Now what?
Yeah.
And so I sold it off. I sold it off piece by piece, and that helped, fund some other things. So I do not have a single older player who I collect. My favorite player growing up was Willie McGee. I was able to get a hold of his 83 Topps PSA 10. That's great. And so what I'm really doing is, so I sort of mentioned it before, for me, my PC is putting together what I would consider to be like the ultimate kids 1980s collection, but in high grades, PSA 9s, PSA 10. So I picked up the Jeffries the day after National, forbid I ever just take a break. But I won a PWCC auction for a 1990 score Frank Thomas PA set 10 rookie, right? That's coming in. Picked up a 1984 Don Mattingly Don Russ a while back in a PSA 7 that was beautifully centered, but it was a PSA 7 price, which is great. Yeah. And when I collect, and I thought about this about 6 months ago, and it really helped me focus, is I think it's Craig from New York City Sports Card says that, what do you want your collection to look like in 10 years? For me, it's if I ever decided to set up for a show in a couple of years, which I don't think I really want to do, is what I'm buying now, would it all fit and would it all look right in a showcase? And if it doesn't look right, you've passed by showcases at a show before, right? And you might see like modern football, but then there's also like vintage soccer, and then there's F1, and you're like, what is this person doing? I'm not even going to look. And if my sort of mental showcase is that way, if I can't see it, if I just want to walk right on past it, I'm not going to buy the card anymore. And so what I've really done, though, is I've really narrowed down the years 1980 to 2007 as being the years where I feel comfortable collecting players who I admired, had fun watching. What that is 1980 is the first year of Rickey Henderson. It's his rookie card. Yeah. 2007 is the final year of Barry Bonds. And to me, that feels like an era because Bonds, of course,
bookends, right? Those are good bookends.
Yeah, his rookie card was 86, and that traded version of it. And that's sort of it. The only modern player I do collect is Ohtani. And the reason I do that is because I've never seen anything like him play. For players who are really exceptional now, we say, oh, they're generational. And it's warranted. He is beyond generational. He is once
He's a unicorn. He's a unicorn. Yeah, you don't.
Absolutely he is. I don't say this a lot, but I used to work in sports media. And I wouldn't say that I became jaded, but I just kind of became used to everything. Michael Jordan had the flu game, but 20 years before that, Mickey Mantle had a flu game. And in 2008 or 2009, Tim Tebow had a flu game. You hear all these narratives. Like it's always the same, and it might sound unique, but it's not. Ohtani was the first player who really came around in my post-sports media career that kind of sparked something that I hadn't felt in a while, where I thought, this is something I'm never going to see again. And so I just started to collect his cards. And I have maybe a half dozen at most, right? He's the only active player now who I actually own cards of. But otherwise, it's that 1980 to 2007 range, which is the players who I grew up with and sort of until the point that they retired and drifted off.
No, Ohtani's a really special player. Wow. What are your thoughts on since we can both geek out on 80s baseball for like the next 3 hours if you have the time. But I'll ask you this question about Topps Tiffany and Fleer Glossy. What are your thoughts on the Fleer Glossy and Top Tiffany parallels, so to speak? We call them that.
Great question. I briefly owned an 86 Bonds Tiffany in a PSA 7. I thought that I always wanted it. I got it, and I was completely underwhelmed by it. The difference between the Topps Tiffany and the Topps base is that the back side is a little brighter, and there are 2 asterisks that are missing from the bottom.
Yeah, here in the front.
It's a little brighter, I suppose, on the front, but it didn't do it for me. The 87 glossy, Fleer Glossy, those are right up my alley, right? So I'm collecting those. I've got the McGuire, the Bow, the Bonds, a bunch of others as well. So it's just sort of a personal preference thing with me, but I've never understood the Tiffany set out of Topps. I mean, I know what it is. I know what its value is. I just don't think that it is as special as, I don't think it turned out as special as they intended it to. And I almost feel like the value of it is more on the fact that it says Tiffany, or that that it's Tiffany, than the way it looks. Whereas with that 87 Fleer Glossy, you look at it, you can tell, okay, there's something different about this card.
I think all of them, it's more about the pop control. I mean, it just because everything was so overly produced in that era. anything that you know, and there was no other parallels. It wasn't like now where there's parallels where you got that, you know, they're producing and it's intentional scarcity that's being put out there, but you also have so many parallels. It's like hard. That was really the only parallel. So for the 80s, if you're trying to collect that kind of stuff in high grade and you're, you know, looking at it from an investment standpoint, this is my assumption. Those are the kind of cards you'll target because of the pops. They're really low comparatively to the 10s that are in the base paper. But then there's a segment of people that go, that's not a real rookie card. That's not a true rookie card of that player because it wasn't from the flagship release. Came in a box set. You have to be able to open it up and, you know, from a pack, right? There's all the rules, man. So, you know, I don't know.
What do you think? Would you consider Bonds' or Canseco or Bo? Would you consider their 86 update tops traded Tiffany? Would you consider that to be a rookie card, or does it have to be from the flagship?
That's a whole other conversation. No, then that's another segment there. There's the update. That's the alternative rookie card. So the Kirby Puckett and the Fleer and the Dwight from '84 update. I had two of those at one time. Those aren't technically rookie cards. They're iconic cards from the 80s, but they're not technically rookie cards because it's supposed to be the flagship set. So there's the 85 Fleer Clemens was probably more of the. And if you talk about Canseco, well, you had the 86 Donruss. That's why it led the way. Just like the 84. Because Mattingly has a Tiffany rookie too, right? But you had the 84 Donruss for Mattingly. It was just the standalone rookie card. I think I tend to be more. I'm more open to all of it. I think that, you know, the Clemens and the Puckett that was their first card with their pro uniform, and it was a small release. I think it came in a set, so you couldn't open it in a pack. But I don't think that matters. I think the Tiffany cards. I mean, I own a Fleer Glossy 89 Upper Deck or 89 Fleer Glossy Griffey, and I own an 89 Tops Traded Griffey in PSA 10. I want to get a Bowman, but it's just too out of reach. I think I had the other ones in PSA 10 as well, but I felt like that was just, I'm really trying to collect the best Griffies possible. So I went, that's the best Griffey from that generation I can get. That was my mindset on it. But, if you think about it from like being a kid, I didn't know about Tiffany or Glossy. So I would have thought the base, that's what I pulled from a pack. You know, that's the card that mattered to me. So I don't know. And it comes down to your personal preference too, right? So I'm going to say I like the 89 Fleer more than I like any other rookie card for Griffey because that's the card I remember the most as a kid, that and 89 Donruss. But I pulled an 89 Fleer. I never pulled an 89 Donruss. I pulled an 89 Fleer from a pack when I was a kid. I had one. So that matters more to me than going. So I'll make some decisions based off that. And I think other collectors do the same thing with different cards across all the generations. But yeah, I think there's room for all of them to be rookie cards. But if you want to go hardcore and go, this is what it is, then yeah, it's just it's the base set. It's the signature set. And if they were in a traded set or an update set, well, then it's going to be, or Tiffany or Glossy, those don't count. It's the following year then. So technically, Bonds' 87 is his rookie card, but they have an OPC 87 Bonds, right? So there's all these different things, man. But that's, I think, what makes it fun, you know, all that discerning opinion, like or dissenting opinion on what's true and what's not. So
absolutely. We think about the Maddox 87, right? There's the Fleer Glossy, there's the Tops, there's the Donruss, there's the Leaf Donruss, right?
Leaf,
and,
yeah.
You know, which is actually worth more than the other one now. So I don't know. I don't care. I just want to get cards that look great, cards that make me think of cool stuff, and that makes me happy.
No, it was funny. I remember spending $150 on a Maddox Leaf PSA 10 at the very beginning. And I remember going, oh my gosh, there's so much money to spend on a card. I can't even believe I'm spending so much money on a card. At that time, I was just like, that's insane. And that card went up to, at one point, like $2,500, $2,600. I could have sold it and made a fortune. Right? I didn't. Because I'm sitting here going, no, it's going to be worth even more. You know, I wish I would have, right? And I ended up eventually selling it, and obviously for profit because, you know, I still trade well. But the Bo Leaf, 87 Leaf, is the one I want to get back at some point. I knew this is a collector thing, but once you sell something, you have a hard time getting back. Those are the kind of decisions you have to discern on. Am I ever going to get it back if I sell this? How hard is it to reacquire this card, right? Or how much am I going to have to pay for it? That Bo is a cool one because some people are asking really ridiculous money for the one I see, but you know, I sold it for like $300. So it's not, on eBay they're asking $8,000. I'm like, it's not an $8,000 card, but it's the only card for sale, so you kind of have to just sit there and basically wait. But
how bad do you want it?
Right. How bad do you want it? But those cards are really cool, man. I mean, they're our childhood. They remind us of why we did it in the first place, like you said. Such a cool discussion. Okay, let's finish this thing off. I know you got to get going here. Let's cap off the conversation, Dave, with this question. So, tell me your top 5 cards in your collection. You're like the ones that you would just never want to sell. Absolutely.
So the first one would be a 1972. It's a 1972 Topps Bob Gibson, and there's a short little story behind it. It's beat to hell. It's not graded. 2004. My wife and I got this card for my mom for her birthday. Gibson was her favorite player. She's the one that taught me about sports. She got me into sports. So like, let's get her a Gibson. Got it off eBay for like, $2, whatever it was. She loved it. Sadly, like 6 months later, she died. And thanks. She'd been sick. And then, so I was helping my dad clean out her stuff, and I'd gone home a few weeks after her funeral. And there, tucked into the corner of her mirror, was that Gibson card.
Cool.
And so I'm like, I'm taking this back, right? And so that's by far number one. That's awesome. The card that I would never move under any circumstances. Number 2 would be my 1983 Topps Willie McGee PSA 10. He was my guy growing up. Not many people talk about him anymore, but guy had 2,500 career hits, an MVP, 2 batting titles, multiple Gold Gloves, World Series. I mean, all sorts of stuff. Just a fantastic player. But I grew up in St. Louis, and if you weren't from St. Louis, you don't necessarily appreciate Willie McGee. So I do. I absolutely do appreciate Willie McGee.
Those Whitey Herzog, man, those small ball teams, Whitey teams back in the early 80s were huge, and Willie was a huge part of that. He was big in the World Series.
It was total small ball. Tommy Herr in 85 had 100 RBIs and 4 homers. Right? It was just the craziest. Those crazy teams.
Cool stuff.
From there, one modern one would be my 2018 Ohtani Heritage Black Chrome Refractor out of 69 rookie card. And it really represented the first card I had to work up to when I got back in the hobby, where I was just selling off all of my, base prisms that I thought that I needed. But by selling off all these little insignificant cards, I was able to acquire the capital to get this card of a player who I really respected and actually might have some value going forward. And so Ohtani is amazing, but the card itself, when I look at it, just makes me think, okay, if you really want something, you're going to have to really work for it. You're going to need to be patient, and you can't just be impulsive and think, well, I haven't bought a card here in 3 days, so let's go on eBay and see what's going to happen. From there, it's going to be the 84 Don Mattingly. That was the Grail chase before the term Grail was even used in sports cards.
Yeah.
I first wanted it back in 85 when it was a year old. Ended up getting it in 2023. So it was about a 40-year chase, but I finally
Holy cow.
Right.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was great. And then the last one I just picked up at National, but I've been looking at it for years and years. Finally decided to take the plunge, and it's a 1934 Gaudi Hank Greenberg.
Wow.
This past summer, I read his autobiography, and could relate to a lot in it. Just an amazing life. He was the first major league player to enlist in World War II, and when his term was up, he enlisted again. He re-upped for a second time. He could have gone back, and he lost years off his career. Finished with around 350-ish home runs, and people see those numbers now and they think, oh, that's one of those old school numbers that they got in. He wouldn't be in the Hall now, but no, he was on track for about 550. Before that, he was chasing down Ruth's. Ruth's single season record at the time, as well, and then just the bigotry and the anti-Semitism that he faced as well, and. He tried to play it off in his book as, well, we all kind of made fun of each other at this, sort of thing. But then they would talk to other people for the book, the author who helped him write it, And they would say, no, it was pretty brutal what he faced. One thing that I really appreciated about it too is that he would go after people. It wasn't he tried to let a lot of it roll off his back, but if it went too far, he would say, I'm gonna kick your ass, and then, he was big for his time. He was 6'3", 6'4", and most baseball players weren't that size. And I don't know, I sometimes think that the just take it approach isn't always best. And to read that the way that he handled himself in times of severe adversity, and still went and was the first to enlist in the Army and MLB, giving up much of his legacy, giving up much of his salary, and then re-enlisting a second time. I just really admire that. And so I don't own a lot of vintage. There's that Gibson card I told you about before that was my mom's. And then there's that. Then there's the Greenberg card. So I'm very proud to own that card now.
Very cool. Very cool. Iowa Dave, this is an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Go check out the Shallow End. Is your
the Shallow End? It's part of the Wolfpack Network. So if you just look up Shallow End, it might not pop up, but if you look up the Wolfpack Network for a podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that's where it's going to be. And Dennis, this has just been fantastic. I've loved talking with you.
No, it's been a blast. We'll have to definitely do it again because there's a lot more we can talk about. I can tell we're very like-minded, and I think we can have another episode at some point to talk more about all these great stories and your journey and different things about the hobby and cards. Oh gosh, baseball. We could talk about a lot of things, but this has been it's been a treat. And so you can check out this episode and more on Sports Card Dad Network, and go check out the Wolfpack Network and Shallow End with Iowa Dave. Really cool stuff. And listen to what he says when he tells you to listen to something. This guy knows what he's talking about. I'd give it a listen. Thank you so much for being on today. Have a great rest of your day. And folks, comment below. Let us know what you think of the episode. Anything we could have done differently. I hope Jeremy or Dustin didn't keep the middle of the episode where it was just me. But if so, hope you guys had fun with me just goofing around a little bit. But yeah, take care. Happy collecting. We'll talk to you all later.